Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spark Unplugged. And today we're going to be focusing on exploring the human impact of AI. As we go through this session today, please feel free to put your questions in the comments and we'll be responding as we go. Got a really interesting episode today. We've got some fantastic panelists. It's a really big topic. And in all honesty, I'm not sure we'll get all the way through with the great panelists that we've got, but we're going to give it the best try. So over the next kind of hour and 20 minutes, we're going to spend a bit of time. We're going to meet the panel. They're going to introduce themselves. We're going to talk about some of the key observations around the kind of human impact of AI. What's in the press? What are we seeing happening? A bit more panel discussion. And then Dave's going to tell us a little bit more about what we're doing in HiveMind to pull together, their assets that we've got in the organization to be able to help people on their human AI journey. So without further ado, what we shall do is we'll move to meeting our panel. So I'll start off and introduce myself. Hi, I'm Craig Wright. I've spent 20 years working on product innovation, strategy, and basically a futurist at big organizations such as Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, and others. Really passionate about where we're going in the world with AI. This is going to be really interesting. And alongside me today, I've got Owen Mills. Owen, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Craig. So Owen Mills, Business Development Director for HiveMind Network. So responsible not only for the growth of HiveMind as a business and a network, but also for the growth within our customer base. Done a lot of conversations and having a lot of conversations around AI, so really keen to see what discussions come out of today. And also, just to give you a bit of background, a lot of my background comes from the learning services business. In those markets, I've seen a big adoption around how we actually train people, but not only just in technology, in the behavioral skills as well that are associated with technology changes and cultural changes as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Owen. And Jennifer, really pleased to have you join us today as well.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I am dedicated to putting people at the heart of decision making. I'm a Top 50 Workplace Leader of 2024, published author, TEDx and global speaker, and also CEO of my own company, AB Change Consultancy, for 13 years, which is named after my kids. I have child A, Amelia, child B, Blake, and they changed my world.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Really good to have you. And Dave.
Dave Clark. I've been in the technology for about 30 years now, feel every one of those years. I am started off as a developer, then became a CIO, then did consultancy, then went back to being a CIO when I realized I preferred that to doing consultancy. Then decided to start HiveMind with Lyndon because I think we both realized there was a far better way of doing consultancy. I'm really interested today, and I think I'm here probably more like our audience to listen and learn as much as anything else, because I think it's huge. And you use the term futurologist, I think, or you are a futurologist.
Futurist.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I think that's the spectrum we're in now. We're in the spectrum of wondering what the future is going to look like, because I think it's going to be radically different. So I'm really interested to hear the views of the panel.
Perfect. So thank you, everybody. And, when we do these Spark Unplugged discussions, what we normally try and do is start off with a bit of a provocation. And actually this one, Jennifer, you brought it to our attention, and it's an external quote, but I found it really quite profound. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do my art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so I can do my laundry and dishes. And when I read this, I had a moment of realization. I was like, oh, yes, that's exactly what I want. But what I've realized is AI is currently being set up to answer the creative questions, and especially with the emergence of Gen AI, how do people feel about this, and why have we landed in this place where it is being more creative rather than picking up the utility pieces of our world? I mean, do we need to course correct? How did we get here?
Well, I think it very much stems on the fact if we go back 10 years, because AI has been around for the last 15 years. It's not suddenly a new thing, but it's generative AI that is very different going forward. But the last 10 years, if we think 10 years ago, a lot of us thought, oh, AI will just do those things that will help us be more effective and efficient at what we do. It won't be able to create, it won't be able to do all the different innovative things that we think we do, and we do. And that set the industry a challenge, didn't it? And as a result, they've decided to take that challenge on and have really focused in on that. And that's where the money's been invested. That's where the time and the resources have been invested. And as a result, that's what's put us into this place now.
Oh, fantastic. Dave, Owen, any kind of thoughts on what that will do to, in the short term, to kind of the skills that organizations look to hire? Do we think we'll see creative skills diminish?
I think that because from a skills perspective, certainly they need to have a look at what the changes are. It's probably not what the businesses thought would have happened. Looked at the kind of the processes, the administrations, and the other things that AI was formerly used for. Now that it's much more advanced and obviously technology is emerging, it's a case of probably readdressing that and going back in and doing a real kind of skills and needs analysis and doing a reset. Plus, a lot of businesses generally look at skills and look at it, and they do an annual appraisal, so they look at skills annually. You know, we will all, I'm sure we'll get into how quickly this technology is evolving and moving, and my suggestion would be that people need to look at that a lot more regularly than they currently do.
Dave, any thoughts on what do you think will happen around creativity?
I think that at the minute I'm still not impressed by the creativity of the current generation. If you try doing prompt engineering to get decent graphics and decent pictures that tell the story in a cohesive way, it's still a bit basic at the minute, and it's still in fact, actually, when I'm on LinkedIn, I think there's nothing turns me off more now than seeing an AI generated picture of a caption. Somebody's done a caption, then they've done a picture, and it's like, nah, just move on. So I think this is an interesting place about the creativity. It's still not there. It's still not there. It will come, but it's still not there yet.
But I think that's the point, is that we know it will come. We've seen where it's got to at the moment. And that's made us sit up and notice and go, okay, maybe it's not going to just, do those tasks from that standpoint. It will be able to do the creative elements. The question is, what value will be put onto that, and what does that mean for us as people going forward?
I think one of the things I have seen when I've talked to people who come from a kind of a more creative world, if they're quite tenured and they've been doing creative jobs for a while, they see the emergence of Gen AI not as an accelerator, but actually as a decelerator, as a brake. Because what actually is happening is often they're getting asked to use the tools and the technology, and they've been classically trained to produce their craft, not to edit and audit or proofread what comes from Gen AI. So I think whilst we're in this kind of mixed mode at the moment where, yes, we're seeing lots and lots of content, lots and lots of data, lots and lots of stuff, to your point on LinkedIn, Dave, which gets AI generated. Whilst that's great, I think a lot of it will just eventually just be noise. And what we'll find is there'll be some very human-centric or some very human curated content which really starts to resonate with people, and that will become a differentiator again for people.
I think it's fine for people to experiment with it, using it for creative purposes. But then it's the measurement of that, isn't it? Like Dave just said, the production of some of the content within LinkedIn, I would absolutely support your view there, Dave. I see that from marketing perspectives. Some of the outputs are not fit for purpose because it's not quite there yet. Now, obviously, as it evolves, it could get there, but that also needs development with the blend of the human intervention to work on that with the technology.
Yes, but we've got to be very careful as to what we put out there and use it in the way in which we use it for. So, if you are a sole entrepreneur and you're trying to use it to create your marketing materials, then you have full control as to what you put out there and all the rest of it. But you've got to be mindful that whatever you're putting in an element of your IP. So if you are a organization or a sole entrepreneur, whatever you may be, if you put something out there, then the AI has that to learn from and to amalgamate that with other things that it's learning and finding out. And that's actually in the Ethernet, internet world from that perspective.
I think somebody explained it to me once as it can create new combinations of things we haven't thought of,
yes,
but nothing net new. And I was there thinking, oh, okay, that's quite an interesting perspective where human ingenuity can invent something which is net new to the world. AI at the moment hasn't reached that critical point. It can only combine what it knows and what it's learned.
But I think that the phrase you've just used again, at the moment.
At the moment, yeah.
That's the case. But where is it going to go?
It isn't. In many ways, in large organizations, I'm sure the people watching this that are running big organizations, that's the most diminutive part of many of these organizations, the creativity and the writing areas. It's like when you think about one of the conversations I had recently with a CIO of a very large company, and he was talking about, the machine-to-machine negotiation, and machine-to-machine pricing and so on. He said, that's the areas, Dave, where I can see massive changes coming, where, we're buying and selling commodities via, that's the sort of areas that these huge job impacts are going to hit first.
I think that's
is mine.
I think that's quite a sage observation, Dave. What I think we'll see is lot of the fireworks or the bangs and flashes from Gen AI that we see at the moment about what it can generate content of will soon be superseded by utility-based AI, which can do the equivalent in industries of laundry and dishes. So whether that's
that's what I mean.
Core tasks in a bank, whether that's core tasks in an insurer, whether that's core tasks in a manufacturer, it will get there. And I guess what we're starting to see is the big tech players and the people who lead the charge on the Gen AI stuff are trying to lure in those organizations and businesses so that we can radically reinvent and break orthodoxies of what came before.
Exactly. Making your baby sing in a picture isn't really the cutting edge of industry, is it? So
it could be a new industry, Dave.
As much as I think, but that's what's creating the whole sort of thing around AI, isn't it? That you can go on your phone and you can make your baby dance or your dog sort of sing a song, which is fantastic. But ultimately, it's what how you phrased it there.
Yeah.
It's the replacement of the laundry and the dishes.
In the context of each industry.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think some industries are going to pick this up quicker than others, but I think that leads us very, very nicely on onto a kind of a slightly different conversation. One of the stats I read this week when I was doing my research around mass adoption of AI, and I don't think it was necessarily cast in the context of solely in AI. 92% of mainstream companies reportedly continue to struggle with cultural challenges. When I think about the profound change that AI is going to bring to every human and to every organization, every process, and every industry, and every business unit, how will the mass adoption of AI impact this 92%? How do we stop organizations having cultural challenges? What's the changes that they need to make to be able to create elasticity in their own world and their own model so that they don't have to live with a set of challenges?
Well, they need to actually start thinking about what is it they want to be as an organization. And it's a challenging question to ask and answer, but it's a really critical question. When you're looking at cultures, like what that actually drives your organization, not just the bottom line, but your people, the behaviors, the mindsets, the values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you need to ask yourself, what is it that you want to be? How do you want to be thought of as an organization? And when you start to unpick that and answer that question, then a lot of the smaller micro questions of hybrid working or universal wage or UN sustainability goals, or how we're actually going to manage all of that, that then starts to become very obvious. And because you know what it is you want to be, and that defines you as an organization.
I also think there's a communication piece as well, because a lot of organizations work in silos, maybe the technology department and somebody else, and say, we're trialing AI for something. Don't communicate it to the business. And what that does is it creates a perception that, are we bringing AI in to take my job, would be a common, thought process that individuals, companies, teams are going through at the moment. So the reality of that is run it as a proper program with some communication, some change management, and make sure that people are aware of what you're trialing it for and what the outcomes potentially looking for and what the efficiencies you're looking for or what the benefits are.
Yeah, but I would go further is before you even do that, you need to actually understand what your readiness level is. And that is something that is really, really key. And there is an enormous amount of assessment that needs to happen at that space. So you need to look at from a readiness arena, where are you from a technology perspective? Where are you from a people capability? Where are you from a leadership capability? Where are you from an organization systems and processes capability arena? All of that will have an impact. And until you know that, you can't actually start to...
I think as well, Jennifer, the interval in which you would need to check in on those things today is much greater than it was pre-COVID. I think what we've actually seen, or what we are seeing, is the metabolic rate that you need to check in on that needs to almost be constant, because if you're not, the world feels very different now than it did in 2021.
Yeah.
And we've gone through a period of having COVID, we've had lockdown, we've got you've got bigger political divides in nearly all parts of the world than we've seen before. So the very fabric and the thought pattern of the people who are going to be in the workplace coexisting with AI has changed on multiple fronts to a greater degree than possibly 3 or 4 generations, I would think, since the Industrial Revolution.
Leadership and management has changed massively. You know, from a coaching perspective, think about hybrid working, giving people opportunities to work the hours that do them based on outputs rather than based on hours in particular roles, not right for everybody. But that's a huge piece that needs to be very carefully thought through, which will flow down to the whole culture of the business.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we are at a cultural crossroads we've not experienced for nearly 100 years. You know, in 1926, Henry Ford created the production line, and on the back of that, he realized that he had to change the way in which his workforce worked.
Yeah.
Because at the time, it was 6 to 7 days a week. And as a result of that, he was ending up with a surplus of product he didn't feel he was ever going to be able to ship. And as a result, he decided he needed to change that, and he created then the 5-day work week. And as a result, he was then able to have the right amount of product that he could sell, and so on and so forth. And we're still in that space. And where we're going now, we're in that same spot. We are going to have to think very, very differently, because we will be living our lives very, very differently. How we are in this room right now is not going to be the same in 10 years' time as it is right now.
Agreed. I think that when I listen to that, and I think it was they said 1926, we get on to 100 years. The concept of the same structures around the relationship we have with work feels crazy. Because if I looked outside in the street here in Manchester, it looks totally different to it did 100 years ago. And I think that the organisation to embrace. That's Dave. It's still raining here in the summer in Manchester. But yeah, that's fantastic observation.
100 years on.
100 years on. But I think the relationship people have with work will radically change. I've seen organizations begin to think about not expressing your job in terms of number of hours that you do, or number of days holiday that you get, or how many targets you've got. And people then change the nature of the relationship in those experiments with work. So you're almost omnipresent, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, but you get ebb and flow. So I think this is going to be, if AI is going to mainstream in organizations and take a bit of the load, this is going to be quite an interesting period as the relationship with work and money fundamentally shifts.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I think, if we kind of move on from there, related to that is where the money is currently going when it comes to AI initiatives. We saw the old kind of 80-20 split when we did a bit of research on this, that 80% of the money was currently going on technology and 20% was going on change or readiness for change or thinking about what the future really looked like. Unless this changes, it's got to have a lasting effect. I mean, any ideas of what that lasting effect might be for organizations who don't get a better balance? And for those who are seeking the better balance, any ideas on any kind of short-term hacks or way to think about this to achieve a better balance?
Well, I can guarantee you 2 things. 1, your rate of adoption will be very low. And 2, so will your ROI. It's that simple. And that's not even just putting AI on the spend. That's the way it's been for years. I mean, in 2020 alone, there was I forget where it was reported how $2.6 billion was wasted just on development projects, just development in 2020. And that was 4 years ago. And that's only one kind of change program. There are loads of others companies that have lost millions because they've done what I would call a technology drop, rather than actually take people along on the journey of it. And that is, as a result of it, they end up not being able to achieve what they want to achieve. And they certainly aren't getting the investment value that they anticipated on that front. And I worked for an organization, it was an infrastructure organization, and they were doing a huge digital transformation program. And I was brought in as the change manager 9 months after the project, or rather program, had started. So it was well in flight. And it was the strategy week where they brought all the senior leads in, and they were talking about what works well, what doesn't go so well, what are we going to do next year, blah, blah, blah. And they were talking about all these actually really fantastic stuff. I was a bit blown away in many arenas. But at the end, I just said, I'm sorry, I got to ask the question, why should I care about any of this? And they said, excuse me? I said, why should I, as Jennifer Bryan, change manager in London, care about any of this? What's the big deal? And they rattled off what I call the management spiel of efficiencies and effectiveness. Yeah, but so what? What I do and how I do it works really, really well. Why should I be doing this differently? And that's when it dawned on them that they needed to actually communicate and take a completely different approach, a people-centric approach, in order to enable this to happen. And so we turned that all around, changed the approach entirely in the next month. And then we had 6 weeks. Within 6 weeks, everybody then suddenly knew, based on that, what they needed to do, why they needed to do it, how they needed to do, and what they needed to galvanize and get everybody else on board.
It's an interesting phenomenon because it's something that we used to see quite a lot in design and innovation. There are a number of organizations who would come up with an idea, technically develop it, and then put some design lipstick on it at the end, rather than design something for the humans that were going to achieve it. Was phenomenal. It continues to be today. And they think that if it looks good, it must work good. And if
we build it, they will come.
It was design as an afterthought. And I think what we've seen here is almost change as an afterthought as well. I mean, Dave, the other thing here that blows my mind is we've seen a lot of the big consulting organizations and professional services firms shed what I would class as their imagination services and their strategy services. So, the people who can help design the future or help customers design the future. I don't know if those services don't exist and they're not being pioneered from some of those big organizations, are they going to permeate and go into end user organizations, or is there just going to be a gap?
Yes, like to think they'd go into the end user organization, because we were talking earlier, and as Jennifer was speaking, for me, this is, we know the answer to this, it's human-centered design. We've known for years that the answer to this is human-centered design. And the bigger question for me is, why have organizations not been able to put the effort and energy into grounding human-centered design at the core of what they do? It seems such an obvious thing when you've been through it, doesn't it?
And this is why I did some research with Henley Business School of Management on exactly that. And there was 5 main reasons. There was time. It was the most insane way. The project managers didn't feel they had the permission to go talk to people outside the project team. So from a stakeholder engagement arena, it's like, how are you going to get people on board if you don't talk to people?
Mm-hmm.
Duh. And so that was another one. There was also the elements of, they're set up to do, people like to do things that they've always done. So it was a bit challenging to do something difficult. So I'll just do what I've always done because that's what I'm used to always doing. And then there was also people coming and going with teams and the fluctuations. But the 5th one, and this is the one that I was surprised by. I didn't anticipate this one because I pretty much knew that it would definitely be these 4. And that was very much around this particular participant. She shared how she was doing a change program, or she was looking to implement a change program. It's going to take 3 years, not unusual time scale. And she was looking to do it in the human-centric way from that standpoint and bring a bit of foresight into it. But the problem was a lot of the milestones or the objectives and the goals were not going to be realized until year 2 or year 3, or some of them not even till year 4 from that standpoint. And yet she's going to be performance managed on an annual basis. And suddenly she's sitting here thinking, well, hang on, if I do it this way, then I'm going to get penalized when it comes to bonuses and performance reviews and pay reviews.
I think that's a great hack, the alignment of incentive to execution.
Yeah, exactly. And which is why I talked about, all this assessment. You've got to look at everything that's going on within the organization.
I think the other item there, which really screams out to me, and Dave, I've shared this with you over many a cup of tea and probably many a beer over the years, is the inability for the team to reach out to people beyond the project. And I think what brings me to this is, I've often said I really hate the idea of a transformation project. An organization gets itself to a position where it's in a cul-de-sac, it's got nowhere else to go but build this project which exists on the side, which builds a cottage industry, rather than ready itself for continuous change where change is the norm. And I think working in several of the big techs, what I didn't really get a conscious grasp of, but happened all the time, is change happened. When I was with Microsoft, Satya turned Microsoft from you buy a license to a subscription model. We changed, and it wasn't like there was ever a conscious change program turned up at Building 101 in Redmond. It just seemingly happened throughout the organization. It was in a continuous,
constant
change.
It was, but I would argue that there was several smaller change programs that happened throughout, because suddenly you were rewarded differently. Suddenly your performance reviewed differently. And those systems had to change. And there would have been
inbuilt. It's not something where there is this new cottage industry which has arrived on the right-hand side of the chart, and they just talk to themselves, and then all of a sudden one day they roll it out and do it to you. You were unconsciously part of the change. And I think that's a positive.
It's part of the culture. It's part of the culture of the business. But going back, I know we don't want to backtrack. I want to take this conversation forward, but it's going back to that cultural alignment, isn't it? That this is where we are. Bear in mind that is one of the hyperscalers, one of the large technology companies, who's probably driving that 80% of the technology spend, which a lot of people that I've spoke to they don't want to get left behind. The honest answer when you get down into nitty-gritty is, why are you spending money on trialing these new technologies, quite rapidly, and trying to deploy them and see if they work? We don't want to get left behind. We've heard about disruption. What will it do to our business? So therefore, a lot of the money goes into let's try the technology, let's go and buy it and put it in.
It's also sexier
through the program.
It's also it's sexier. Working with people is difficult. You're going to be dealing with emotion, and people find that scary at the end of the day. And whereas give me a new phone, I'm going, ooh, what's that? Unless you're my mother-in-law who goes, oh no,
not this again.
But no, genuinely, it is sexier. I mean, we've been talking about constant change, or change being constant, since Cotter wrote about it in 1997. This is not a new thing, but what needs to change, what hasn't changed, is our concept of change. So you talked about it being this thing over here on the side that then gets deployed and it gets done to us. That's exactly how change should not be happening. Even as a change manager coming in as a consultant, I should not be coming in and doing it to anybody. I should actually helping people and enabling them
100%
so that they are doing it. And that's what I advise my clients. It's like, look, I'm going to go, after 6 months or however long this contract is. I'm gone. I'm out of here. This is your baby. Your people need to actually be doing the change.
I think the mindset that probably needs to be removed is the notion that you're ever done.
That's it.
And they've got to build their own muscles and their own skills to continue evolving and moving forwards. And I think if they can do that, it probably takes more than 20% of the spend, like we've got here on the 80-20, to even achieve that. Because if you're going to set it up once and get it running, this split between the spend feels to me like it should be at worst 60-40 and at best 50-50, because we need to create a platform for people to exist in.
The split on the split in regards to the spend is because so many people think they can just wing it.
Yeah.
And they just go, we'll just throw it out there and then, we'll see what happens and all the rest of it. And as a result, the reason why I more often get called is when, pardon my French, the shit hits the fan, Or they go, oh, we need to get a whole bunch of comms out. We better get a change person in.
Yeah.
And that's not when these things should be happening. If you want to integrate it, because it's not to say you don't need help integrating it and having this integrated within the organization. It's just you need to be thinking about it long before you're actually doing anything.
So I think that is the big takeaway. If you've not already thought about it and you're already doing these things,
You're in trouble.
Get help. Yes, it's now time to get some assistance. I think I think the other thing that we talk about quite often is how AI will affect how and where humans work in the future. What we've seen as we went through COVID was everybody work from home. I quite like the model. I think it's good, right? It's good.
And you working in tech industry didn't actually already spur that.
Already had it. So it wasn't like new, but I did travel a little bit less, which is great. But I saw a stat which said 90% of firms with office space will have returned on site by the end of 2024. And I thought about this and I thought, holy cow, that's like going backwards. The M4 is getting busier, the M25 is getting busier. I'm sure the M60, M62 is getting busier, right? And as we become more automated and more intelligent and work with more intelligence, how are we going to see the how and where we work change?
Well, first of all, I would challenge that stat because it's not saying that that's all the time.
Yeah.
So, how much is the return on site? Is it 2 days? Is it 1 day, 3 day, whatever? But hybrid working is an operating model. It is not a workplace design from that standpoint. And so with the fabric or the change of AI, how and where, I think that actually is going to work into whatever we've decided this operating model is going to be as an organization. Because again, going back to what the organization wants to be and be thought of, that then helps define what is that operating model for that organization. And then how you integrate the AI within the organization, how it gets utilized and what it supports from mechanisms, because that's effectively what AI is going to be. It's going to be another colleague from that standpoint, where we will have to learn, how to speak to that colleague, what words work well with that person versus words that work well with another person, et cetera, et cetera. The difference between American English and British English, it's at the end of the day that language is going to be needed to be utilized, and how we use it will be very much like how we work with a colleague now and how we're working with each other in this room on that front. What we could argue that in the not so distant future, one of us could be replaced with an AI from that standpoint, and we're working in that arena.
I think that's entirely correct. And I think when I look at this a little bit deeper in certain industries such as manufacturing, what I saw when we mainly kicked on by COVID was artificial intelligence, digital twins. They were used to break the linkage between the physical location of a resource and the outcome of a task. So if you were a manufacturer, you had to find ways of having control over production sites during COVID as the world kept going without having people physically in a workplace. And I think artificial intelligence allowed people to get new views of data, new inputs, new decision-making models remotely and in new places, so they could sit there and keep, mayonnaise factories going or toilet roll factories. And it was a very different model that we saw emerge. And I think what we'll start to see with the how and the where, I agree it's an operating model, is AI will break down the barriers such as language, such as geographic location, and it will democratize skills into kind of a global set.
It will, but I think it will also democratize and make the workforce even that much more diverse, because it was during the pandemic, and I don't think it was here. I think it was somewhere in China where they operated a restaurant during the pandemic with all of the wait staff being robots that were then controlled by people who were actually disabled at home and couldn't leave their house. Yet they were suddenly able to be interactive and sociable and all the rest of it because they were being represented as this robot in the social space.
Another good example of that was the UK-based insurance company that when we returned back into the workplace, had quite a lot of return to work parents, and the return to work parents worked in the customer service section, and then we've all chatted to the bot. It's only available from 8 till 9 o'clock, because 8 till 9 o'clock is the busiest time on the motorway, and actually it's also the busiest time for doing the school run. So they utilised one of the tools, which is the chatbot, going back to very early form, but much more advanced now form of AI, that was there for enhancing that person's experience and culture of the workplace by saying, well, my employer is really good because they give me flexible working hours.
Yeah.
You understand it's difficult for me to actually get from, A to B at a certain time. That's when everyone else is traveling. So we've utilised the tool to make it, a positive engagement, both from the business, maybe not as a positive for the end user. I mean, that's a whole different conversation to go down. Well, it's utilising a tool to make the workplace a better place.
I think the experience that we get from it is, I'm thinking about experiences I've had in recent times. I've had one really bad one with an airline with a chatbot, and it was obvious it was a chatbot. And then I had a really good one the other day with a financial institute. I didn't realize that I'd gone from chatbot to human to chatbot to answer my query and get it answered in one go. If I'd looked at it from an experience perspective, it was kind of very much streamlined. But I think this will give us the chance to genuinely change how and where we will turn up for work. And I think as talent emerges into the AI infused world, they will make employment decisions and career decisions based on where they can have their human aspirations as individuals best fulfilled. So,
Absolutely.
all the graduates moving to one particular city to live in very high expensive accommodation might not be a thing, hopefully in 10 years time, which it's still it's returning to that model at the moment in the UK, I think, which is quite a shame. But if we kind of dig a little bit deeper on this, and there's a term that kept coming up when I looked at the sentiment of lots of the articles that I read, and the term was getting AI ready. And nobody actually took the time in their research or their analysis to actually say what this meant and actually what it meant from a human and a change perspective. So I thought, what a great challenge. I've got Dave, I've got Jennifer, and I've got Owen. I'm going to ask them, what do they think getting AI ready really means? What are the building blocks, especially from a human and a change perspective?
Well, there's two different elements of that. And that is, there is the AI readiness element, and that's where you need a load of assessments that we've talked about beforehand in all those different areas. And then there's the AI enablement side of things, and that's where you've got the training and the comms and the change networks and your AI governance body, and et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is, when we talk about getting AI ready, it's about, are we talking about that readiness bit, which I would argue that's what it should be about, or is it actually about the enablement element? And you can't have one without the other. You have to go through the readiness assessment first. You need to know where your organization sits. What is it? Are your leaders ready for this? Are they capable to deal with all of it that's going on? Are your teams, are your processes, are your systems, is your tech, all of that? And you may end up with answers to the questions that you don't like. But at least then you know what you need to do to be ready to then go to a deployment of AI. And I think that the challenge is so many people are just diving into the deployment and not doing the readiness.
It comes back to the 80-20, I think, that technology and the 80 goes on things like data. And what that really means is it doesn't even go on strategy or readiness around data. It goes on doing something with data, or it goes on building something. And I kind of have a feeling at the moment that there is and Dave, I think you called it smoke and mirrors once before, around how knowledgeable people really are around AI. I think that a lot of organizations would say that they're ready when they haven't really got that much awareness of what it would really take to be successful as an AI enabled organization, and that's from a leadership team perspective and from the ability to promulgate down what they really want from that purpose, from the purpose.
It's from the ground up, and it's just a common education goal. I think this technology is not going away. This technology is becoming more apparent in most people's everyday lives, and therefore we've got a whole education piece to do around what is it, what does it do, what does the terminology stand for. So there's a lot of people going and talking about AI, using AI, trying AI. Well, does everybody understand what it can do or what the basics of it is? So I think there's an education piece to do there, but I completely agree with your sentiment, Jenny. There's two parts to that. And then we've already discussed the 80-20 split. Everybody's diving into the technology without understanding or having a bit of a reset moment to say, let's just assess where we should maybe experiment with this first to see what the outcome will be.
I think I agree with you, but I would say you need to, before you can ask, what is it, what could we do with it? You need to understand, first of all, where are you at?
Yes.
With it? How are you, how's your what's the capability around the organization's mechanisms around that? Because if you're just diving into it,
yeah,
I really hope you've got a fantastic legal team ready and willing, and you've got a phenomenal retainer.
Yeah,
because you're going to need it.
I think that's one of the areas that we've talked about before of how do we stop accidents happening with AI and that situation arising. I think that the one thing which comes out for me is when I look at the training that's available and the learning that's out there, it's all tech based.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot around that area that you just talked about, Jennifer. You would have to find the expert, ask the question of how do I stay out of jail, or how do I stay out of court, or how do I not do stuff in the kind of not contravene rules around governance and around usage of AI. And I think that stuff is lagging behind GPT 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and eventually it will get cracked, because what we saw a few weeks back was a paper firm or an article by the New York Times which suggested that organizations like McKinsey are getting 60% of revenues from Gen AI implementation. Now, whether that's factually correct or not is up for debate. It's a published piece of insight. But what you would think is the supporting services that wrap around that Gen AI usage are going to help people in those other areas and other spaces pretty quickly. So I think that's really interesting around how we get AI ready, and I think unpacking that is going to be something which continues to evolve. The next kind of topic that I'd like to introduce, or the next topical thing that I've seen a lot in the press recently, and I've used a quote here from Satya Nadella, and he is around jobs in the labor market. Satya recently stated that AI will displace jobs. It's interesting that he called his product Copilot, but he suggests obviously that in a few years there's going to be no pilot, and it's going to replace quite a few jobs. The IMF, so the International Monetary Fund, has also warned 40% of jobs could be affected by AI. This has a kind of seismic human impact, right? Is that where we are? What do we think will happen? How do we think this will shape out?
Well, I think, first of all, yes, this will get rid of a lot of... It already has. It's already done it. If looking at the voiceover industry, it's why they're striking last year at the end of the day. And it's already having a major impact on a load of different industries, and it will continue to do so. But there will be a creation as well of jobs that we haven't even thought of. We don't even know exist yet going forward. What we don't know is the ratio, the difference between that. But the other added element into all of that, and doesn't really, I think, get discussed much, is that in the Western world, we are not producing as many children, babies, as the baby boomers did. So there will be fewer people actually needing or wanting or work going forward, because there will be fewer people in the Western world in that level.
Can I challenge that a little bit? Because I did a a number of sessions with senior leadership teams over the last few years where I was asked a question by boards quite regularly, where will jobs disappear? And I think I went off and I did some research with the inside parts of those organizations. And I asked them what these new jobs were. And they all said the same. We don't know what they are yet, but we're sure they'll come. And I looked at it with a bit of skepticism, because when I combined that with the fact that where they told me the majority of jobs would get cut in organizations, it made me think that we're going to have some huge gaps in career ladders, in society, and the very relationship we have with work is going to change. So, for example, rather than, if we think about, normally we'd represent work or the corporate hierarchy as a pyramid, and what we would expect AI, if we go back to the initial quote that we used about the washing and the ironing, everybody expects the jobs at the bottom to go first. It's like natural trickle down kind of thought process that humans have. And I think what we started to see in nearly every industry, it was the jobs in the middle. And the jobs in the middle, if you're here in the UK, they're probably the ones which are going to contribute the most to the gross domestic product of the UK and the economy here in the UK. If they're gone, these new jobs that come are going to have to be better to make the situation overall better. Otherwise, we've got a bit of a challenge.
I think this is going to be a government issue. I think it's going to be a government universal wage issue. I understand Jennifer's point about how many are going to be created. If I was a betting man, I'd bet there's going to be less created than there are lost.
Yeah,
every time. And then we're going to start to go. It's the thing where people say, well, when everything automated and AI and robotics, how do you pay for the things and the produce that they create? And so I'm probably quite I don't know whether pessimist's the right word, because in a society where I'm free to do the things I want to do, and it's a wonderful utopian Star Trek world rather than a sort of Blade Runner world. I believe I'm more Star Wars, Star Trek than Blade Runner. But only if this government change is made in a governmental level that work suddenly stops being seen as the answer to all our problems. I still get frustrated in regards to political views when you hear people talking about jobs and creating jobs and wealth and so on. It's not going to carry on the same, in my view, as it is now. And this hollowing out is going to happen.
Can I put something across from a kind of a skills perspective on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Just to kind of complement, I think, what Dave's saying there. We've got a big focus on apprenticeships and bringing kind of youth through on a different potential mechanism than universities, although there are degree apprenticeships out there as well. We have got a technical skills gap globally, which is getting bigger and bigger. And we've got a technology area here, which is forecasted to get bigger and bigger. So there's a clear match there, isn't there, by putting some emphasis on if people are potentially going to be losing their opportunity to work in their current role, what is their opportunity to go and cross-skill, upskill, reskill into an area? I know you said they weren't sure of those areas. If I was a betting person, I would definitely bet that AI is going to feature in some of those roles, or at least the awareness of it. So I was just putting that across, that whilst there will be 40% of jobs would be affected, and we think that jobs are going to go, there'll be new jobs created. And therefore, there needs to be some forward planning emphasis put around educating some people who want to have that opportunity to go and work into that different area.
Yeah, I mean,
skill set.
it's
And it won't be for everyone, but it will be for some of those people.
Yeah, completely. The value of horizontal development has hugely diminished for some reason. I don't know why, over the last 15 years within work, I would argue. And instead, this mentality of only vertical development
I would
is
think
of any value.
economic pressure.
I think it's beyond just economic pressure, because whether you're looking for a permanent job or a contract role, every time I talk to people, it's very much about, I want someone who's done the exact same job with my competitor. In the exact same way. So people don't want to continue just doing the same thing over and over again. They want to be doing things differently. And you look at the younger generations coming through, the value for them is not to actually continue just being, oh, I'm going to go and put that thing over there and I'm going to keep doing that every day for the next 20 years. That's not their future, and that's not the future that they want, nor the future they're going to have. They're like, I want to learn that, and then tomorrow I want to learn that, and then I'll learn that, and then I'll go over here and I'm going to do this. It's about breadth, as more so, I would say, than just depth.
It's a talent acquisition and talent retention problem.
Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing there, and I agree with, is that people want to learn new things, but no one's giving them the chance because it doesn't say you've got experience of it on your CV.
Yep.
I'm not going to go down the AI and recruitment issues in the market at the moment, but
I think
even going in just to a different, just to go into a different industry. Oh, I did exactly that, but I did it in the finance institution. Therefore, but I want someone who's done it at FMCG. So I'm going to get somebody who's done it at FMCG. But you're like,
to open up ways, yeah.
Really? Come on.
I think brands want instant gratification. They want to find unicorns who've done it elsewhere so that they don't have to challenge orthodoxies and they don't have to have a bedding in period where new thinking comes in from industry to industry. But I also think that a lot of people focus on a ladder or the pyramid in many industries now, purely because of the fact that if you look at what it takes as an earlier in career individual to get established, I think I saw some stats today that said the average first-time house buyer in the UK used to be about 25, and it's now almost 10 years older than that. The only way that they can get the financial power to be able to get on the housing market to get a home is to climb the ladder. So the exploration of adjacent things on the ladder, which possibly would pay the same but would be more fulfilling and interesting, gets trumped by this need to have somewhere safe and somewhere to live. And I think that is a really interesting concept, because once these jobs in the middle start to disappear, there'll be less places for these folks to go. These new roles will need to be beyond what the old roles were. Otherwise, we're in a situation, like Dave said, where a living wage needs to come in, which supports people from the ground up.
I don't disagree with it, but I think, we've got to be thinking of this differently. Going forward, we can't continue doing what we've always done.
I agree.
That is not feasible. So as leaders, we can't continue doing what we've always done. As people, we cannot continue always doing what we've always done. We've got to look at things differently. We've got to do things differently. And only then will we actually be able to survive from that standpoint as an organization. And because if we don't get on board and start to actually look at differently and see what else is possible, the possible is going to fly by you.
It's really interesting, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, Jennifer, in the slightest. I think what I'd be interested to see is if we took in a traditional-ish industry like banking, let's say, when will we see the first mover for radical change in the labor market, in an organizational structure, in a radical way, to move to an automated model with these new roles in these new places? And will that cause them will that cause the brand that does it to face a backlash from their customers because they've actually got rid of the humans? Or will it be accepted because the general public, the customers of that organization, will go, it's brilliant, we can now get a better deal because the company is more profitable?
I think it will very much depend on how it happens. And that's going back to, are you bringing people along on the journey?
Yeah.
And hence, those individuals need to be included in your stakeholder engagement and your stakeholder mapping and understanding where they are coming from, using, that in-person and mind perspective from that standpoint. And that, which is what I define as the person who is the furthest from the decision-making room. And what are they thinking and feeling about life at the moment? How confident and assured do they feel about just it being in the world, much less then what would they think and feel about the change and how that will impact them. And all of that will, if you can actually work and understand what's going on for them and communicate and work with them on whatever it is, then you've got a much higher probability of being able to enable things and bring that people along. Whereas if you just go, oop, there it is.
It's such you could run Microsoft with 5 people and make 20 times the profitability and still be rewarded by his stakeholders and shareholders. Would he do it? Sorry, Satya, but I'm just asking him hypothetically.
Would he do it today, or would he ultimately do it?
Would he ultimately do it?
Yes, I would suggest. Yeah. Would he do it today? No, because I think he would recognize that the backlash
from the consumers,
and everybody,
which actually means that he won't get rewarded because it will affect on the bottom line.
Correct.
So what he's really balancing is, I don't necessarily mean him, obviously, but any CEO, most CEOs are measured on that. So ultimately, their journey towards profitability and success and return on revenue will drive all of these things.
Yes.
Over the time period that it takes, it might be 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, but it will happen. So politics is going to have to kick in at some point.
I don't disagree. Politics will have to kick in at some point. But what I would argue is all of those things that, the money element that people are typically rewarded by, how much profit we make, what that bottom line is, all of that is determined by people's behaviors, all of it, from every angle. So if you ignore the people behavior element, that will impact negatively on your bottom line.
I totally agree.
Whatever that may be. Also, though, in the reverse, if you focus in on your people behaviors and actually give it the attention, the 80% attention that it requires rather than the 20%, that will affect positively, again, on your bottom line.
Well, the definition of company is group of people, right?
Yeah.
It's a group of people. If all your group of people are happy, singing and have the same purpose, your company is very likely to be successful if you're making the right calculated decisions, right?
So let's build on this a little bit. For the workers who are impacted by AI, should the emphasis be on countries or corporations to create a skills safety net?
Both.
Yeah,
both. Yeah, both.
You can't.
I've got less faith in the corporations doing it.
Well, corporations at the end of the day have a moral responsibility from sustainability arena, and their people clause and their contracts and all the rest of it. And they are the ones that are paying salaries. However, countries have also got to have that responsibility. However, if in one country, there is a universal wage, the corporations are operating in multiple countries.
Yes.
And so that's going to have an impact. So they have to actually work together.
Global initiative, really.
Well, and this is the thing. This is a conundrum, because you would think, oh, well, we've got the UN for that, but they've never done anything like this before in trying to create. And what have we given them first of all, have we even given them the power, the ability, the authority from us as their people, because they are representing us, to actually even start to think and talk and have that conversation, much less do anything about it?
I think if I come back to, you said, Dave, you've got more faith in countries than you have in corporations. The first thing that pops in my mind when you say that is, how do corporations behave with their people in the existing model? And what I've seen in the news is they can send you a text message saying, thanks for your endeavors, don't bother coming back tomorrow. Somebody from HR will be in touch. Please put your laptop in a bag.
Move their factories to the lowest cost production environment. Avoid the countries that haven't got the same balance systems. They don't necessarily, many corporations behave always with the greatest level of, what's the right word for it? Compassion.
Yeah.
Integrity.
I think it is compassion on an individual level. They see a workforce as a workforce. It's an asset that they can maneuver and manipulate as they see fit to make money in most instances, because most of them report back to the street, and that's how they're judged.
I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, but I'm going to throw
feel free to disagree.
But I'm going to sit there and say, it's not all doom and gloom. Not everybody is a peanut fairy. It's at the end of the day, it's in or Nestle or whatever it may be from that standpoint. Some organizations do operate in an ethical and with integrity and all the rest.
Yeah.
Do all of them? No. Do they actually, as you, to your point earlier, really are driven by the bottom line? Yes, of course they are. But there are loads of examples out there that prove you focus in on your people, it will have a positive impact on your bottom line. Microsoft is one of them, and it's well documented all across Google. They are always behind Apple, and they were struggling to from a financial arena prior to 2016. They were really battling against AWS and Google and all the rest of it, whereas Apple was on top. But then 2016, and I'm going to backtrack slightly. I'm going to bastardize this, so sorry, Microsoft. But in my own words, their vision prior to 2016 was to make people and organizations the best they want to be through our products and services and blah, 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 blah. They then cut out in 2016 the products and services element and just kept the people. And suddenly, boom, and that's exactly. And suddenly, instead of them having to think about, my client A has phoned up and they need some help and da-da-da-da. So now I've got to negotiate with my client, when I go up and how much the budget is and that travel. And then I've got to invoice it. It's all part and parcel. Yeah, sure, client A, I'll be there tomorrow. How's 10 o'clock? And how people were then reviewed and rewarded and all that. It changed everything. And their bottom line was impacted really positively as a result of that. And that's just one example.
I think I don't disagree at all. I think that the people who get displaced, there needs to be better protections from the countries against the corporations. And I think what we haven't seen yet is a catch-up of employment law around how these people are dealt with when end of useful life in a corporation comes, because the corporation isn't responsible for the well-being of a citizen in the UK, for example. But then we've got a government that is a new government, but it might make some good changes, that hasn't put in place anything which would solve the problem for a 45-year-old person who'd done something for 20 years coming out of regular employment, who would still has 15 years to go on a mortgage and is suddenly looking at the world thinking, geez, I go on LinkedIn and all the jobs I used to look at are no longer there and I don't have any of these skills. What am I going to do now? Yeah.
It's about that horizontal development.
Yeah.
There is an element of reskilling. We've got to think differently. No, we haven't been in a position since the 80s where jobs for life. That psychological contract died.
I agree. Yeah. And I think the way I view it is that people or talent in the future will have multiple relationships with multiple employers, and they will take responsibility for their own skills and their own HR and development record. And as soon as that penny drops for most people in the world, we'll stick with the UK, the better for the working population here, because I think what has happened, to your point, is in the 80s, you had a job for life, you got a final salary pension or a defined scheme, and you would work till you were 55, 60, and if you were lucky enough, you would stop. Now, and you'd have one relationship with one employer for 20 years. I think now what we're going to see is, as the new world comes in and AI comes in and intelligence arrives, people will have a portfolio of employers that they work with, which is, I guess, we've got a lot of folks in the HiveMind network who've made a conscious choice to move out of a one-to-one relationship with an employer into a one-to-many relationship where they can provide a portfolio of careers and they've got flexibility. I think the learning journey, and I went on this journey as an individual, the learning journey is you then take responsibility for developing your own skills and remaining current with the world. And I think that is something that, if you're out there and you're listening to it and you think you are going to be subject to, losing your job in a one-to-one relationship with an organization, it's not the end. It's actually the beginning if you're prepared to come at it with that mindset of you can learn and you can do things, because there's always work out there for people who want to find work. And I think that is something which may come out of the AI revolution, that people actually do less one-to-one work and more one-to-many work and live a more healthy, balanced lifestyle as an individual. But I think, could I have Craig AI and could I work simultaneously with multiple organizations? Yes, I probably could. And I think that, and I do. And I think that's a healthier way of thinking about work. But it's going to take 1 or 2 generations to come to the fore.
And on the skills piece, Craig, there's a lot more education out there now, sources of education to go and learn these skills, especially in AI. So actually spoke to a client who's looking at enhancing their AI skills probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago now, who had actually gone through the internet. Whilst the vendors obviously provide a lot of AI certification training that's actually now free to consume, as well as the training providers who are licensed to sell that, there is actually a plethora of information out there on the internet that you can go and educate yourself about that.
We've shared lists before, I think, in our first Spark Unplugged of courses which are available.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure they get shared again as soon as possible. I think, the final, or one of the final questions that I had that I think we've touched on, right? We touched on the fact that AI will have an human effect on traditional career ladders. We've heard a little bit of it, but if you are going to prepare for this new world where you might have multiple relationships, you might be working in AI, what type of skills to have that horizontal dexterity that you talk about? What are the skills that people need to build? I mean,
well, it is critical, absolutely critical. People have really good emotional intelligence skills, and they need to be actually building those skills on a regular basis. A lot of people do Sudoku to keep their brain active. You need to be doing that in the EQ perspective on that front, because it is critically important. We've been talking about that, I know, for a couple of decades, and everybody thinks, so yeah, I've done a Myers-Briggs, or that's not emotional intelligence. It's about really understanding what's going on for people, because the other big thing that we haven't touched on at all, that is one of the big buzzwords in work at the moment, is well-being. And how much we expect leaders and managers to be able to manage the well-being of their staff and employees. Now, that seems like, a no-brainer. Well, of course you're going to look after your people, but how many people actually know how to, are comfortable asking the questions, particularly on in a hybrid space? Some of us, we don't even manage teams all in one location. I'm not talking about, just in London or in the same office. I'm talking about across the globe, and how comfortable people say, are you okay? Is everything all right? You just look like you might be upset or something.
I think the development of human managers or human management subordinate relationships in that way, the way that organizations teach that now, or the way that academic institutes teach that, is fallen a little way behind. So some of the leaders that get to, if we stick in almost any industry, the people who seem to get promoted to management are the ones who are best as individual contributors, and they're possibly not the best ones to actually be managers of people. And they go into those roles. And I would suggest, if we took to the internet and looked at it, most of those first-time managers are not very good at managing the well-being and the emotional state of their people.
And the delivery of most organisations to first-line managers programs is to do it via e-learning or digitally, which, in my opinion, is not as effective as getting people back face-to-face.
Done on double speed.
In a workshop. Yeah. So I think there's two aspects to the question. I think that's one from a behavioural perspective. We talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about leadership and management.
Coaching.
I think and coaching and mentoring is all crucial in the current modern workplace. The other side is obviously the technical piece as well, and understanding, even an awareness of the technical products that are now people are just expected to use. Yeah, from that be office applications, from that be AI, that be cyber awareness, security awareness. There's two aspects to that, and I think we've got to just get the balance right.
Because I was working for another organization, and we did a digital capability assessment. And when we were going out and doing various different focus groups to really get an understanding of what the actual capability is in the technology space, how comfortable are people with the different systems that they had going on, really kind of unsurprisingly, the young generations were really au fait with it all. You know, they are really quite good at most of it, whereas your senior leaders didn't know hardly anything. You know, and so it's and yet we expect them to, from that standpoint, and that opens up, to be fair, a huge opportunity where you can do something like reverse mentoring, and other various things to actually help with, and that's that again, that breadth within the career development side.
I think the human connection piece and the well-being piece go hand in hand. I think we've created some very effective mechanisms in which to have short burst communications with one another as humans, but we haven't quite caught up on what it means to check in on people. Dave, you told me the story the other day about working when you were a young consultant with managing partners. You'd get in the car with them and you'd brief them on the way there, and they would talk with you and they would understand what was going on. Mm-hmm. If I think about that dialogue and that interaction, they would probably pick up on nuances and cues on the way that you were looking, the way that you were feeling, the tone you were using. Mm-hmm. When that journey is replaced with a Teams message, mm-hmm. they can't tell whether you're worried.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, I thought about that.
You know, and I think that those human connection moments and that well-being piece requires constant evolution in every organization and real focus, because, you know, teams start to get together to do collaborative exercises as we moved into remote working. But I don't know if anybody has really cracked the nut of how do I keep a healthy, happy, engaged team on all fronts, because the professional leadership element has gone. And like I said, I come back to it, I used to see in big tech, the best developers became managers. The best managers probably left the organization.
Well, that it's all around, that miscommunication. It's the same thing you talk about, Teams message. You then send an email. How many times have we sent an email to somebody? And I'm sure, I know I've done it. And I'm sure everybody's done it. And, in your head, you've said it one way and in one thing and so forth. And then you get this response. You're like,
oh, I didn't expect
holy
this.
crap, I didn't, that was not what I...
The tone in your mind is the tone when you even read it the next day.
Exactly. And I think we get it's too automatic for us to always go to the verbal. However, I would say also that is quite generational as well. I mean, the younger generation actually are quite terrified, and this has been documented a number of times, and I've spoken to my kids about it. They're like, what, phone somebody? I mean, actually phone and talk to them. They phone each other, they chat with each other constantly by doing this the whole time on that front. The concept of actually phoning and speaking to somebody, they'll be good. And my kids are quite good at talking to people when you put them in a room. But they're going to phone you.
Because they won't even phone the pizza shop. They just log on. You just log on and order it online.
Exactly.
It's emotionless, it's faceless, it's easy.
I found myself on this panel thinking, actually, I wish there'd been a 20-year-old here, because I'd like to have heard their views on some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's something we should be one
I'd like to have some perspectives of people who are at the start of their career, not towards the end, or end in my case.
As I say, towards the end, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, sorry. Hopefully this today wasn't the end, Dave.
If you're saying that to me, that's a worrying. They can see does I work for you.
So I'm guessing, just kind of being conscious of time. It's been action-packed. It's been everywhere. I think there's so much we could talk about on this.
Such a big topic.
Big topic. There is no right answer. There is no wrong answer. There's just new questions. I'm going to start with you, Jennifer. If you were, what 3 pieces of advice would you give organizations about AI and change? And I'm going to come to you, Dave, and Owen, to kind of expand on us and give your thoughts as well.
Right. Well, first of all, you need to decide what it is you want to be as an organization and how you want to be thought of. That is first and foremost. If you don't know the answer to that question, I'm wondering, why are you trying to answer a whole bunch of others? You need to really understand that. 2, you need to be deliberate in your decision making. Being wishy-washy and all over the place, and we might do a little bit of this and we could kind of do a little bit of that. deliberate, very definitive and deliberate in your decision making. And two, don't try to do it on your own. Build a strong network around you of peers, of colleagues, getting different perspectives from different areas from that standpoint. Have some people who are completely out of your industry and out of maybe even the world of work. Get a painter and say, what do you think about this? Get a poet, and as well as your comms and marketing person and et cetera, et cetera. Get some different perspectives and build a network around you to actually enable the change.
I think those are really interesting insights. I had a short gap once between jobs, and what I decided to do was go and do some give back work. So I joined a couple of local community groups which chopped down invasive species of trees. And as a young designer and innovator, I wanted to kind of meet lots of different people. And I worked out that I'd worked with folks in big tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
My circle of friends was big tech.
Mm-hmm.
My life was big tech. And I went and I met these people in a place called Simon's Wood, which is near Wokingham. And they used to land American planes there in the Second World War. And seeds used to drop out and they grow invasive species of trees. And what I realized is most of the chaps who were there came from very diverse backgrounds to me. There were different ages, there were different social demographic groups, so they were very different. And it was a fascinating couple of months of working with them a couple of days a week and just asking them questions about the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because the perspectives they would give on a topic were totally different to the ones that I held. And I used to ask them, we used to sit afterwards around a campfire, have a mug of tea, right? Which was very different to sitting in Starbucks in your corporate environment. But the insights I got from listening and hearing from those people and that diversity of thought was undeniable. So I think that one's a really big one. Build a strong network, get diverse perspective. Owen, what would you add to the kind of three that Jennifer's given?
Yeah, so again, strongly believe in the network piece. And to build on that, I would absolutely encourage people around the education. I think if you're going to go and put new technologies in, you need to educate your people, not only on the technology capability, but why you're doing it and what the business purpose is. I mean, what I've heard today is all around that communication piece and ensuring that people know what journey you're on. And if you know what journey you're on, therefore, what's the common goal? What's the common objective? What might that look like for you in the 1 year, 3 years, 5 years plan?
Awesome. Dave?
Well, I'm not going to do three.
You can do as many as you wish.
I was just going to do one, which is, and we touched upon it earlier, Jennifer. Just do human-centered design, do it properly, because that incorporates technology change and design. So just do that, do it well, commit to it.
Yeah, and I think if I was given one as well, Dave, I think the one takeaway that I would have from the conversation we've had here comes back to the 80-20 slide, and I think the preparedness and the ability to educate your organization and build that purpose out before you start and get things in the right order is something which really resonates with me. So I would encourage organizations who maybe aren't quite so sure to make sure they do that first and don't bowl headlong into a change initiative.
I would like to set whoever's listening a challenge.
Go for it.
So we've talked a lot about the 80-20. What I'd like to say is who and by how much can change that dial so that instead of it being 80-20, it's more 60-40 or 50-50.
50-50 is the optimum, I think.
So that's my challenge. Who and by how much can change that dial?
I think it's a good challenge. I'd be interested to see what people's thoughts are.
I'd love to see it.
So I guess that brings us along to how HiveMind kind of curating assets to drive customer success across AI and change. I think there's probably we've got great examples of it today. We're building a fantastic ecosystem. We're building out services and products to educate boards on and teams on AI, surface use cases, and we're bringing in fantastic people like Jennifer and others and Owen into the network and into customers to be able to drive their agenda forward.
It's our three core domains, isn't it? The answer really, when we sort of regrouped HiveMind into its new core domains, that we draw experiences from. We'd said there was a design domain, change domain, and a technology domain. And those three form the Venn diagram. And sort of sitting in the middle of the Venn diagram is the ability to change your organization through design, tech, and change. It's not, it genuinely isn't rocket science, but that's how we're organizing ourselves, whilst also working out how to turn them into consumable products and services as well, I guess, Craig. And then actually cutting through all of the smoke and mirrors and bullshit to find really good people. Because at the minute, there's so many people rebadging themselves and respraying themselves. And it's really important to try and cut through and find the really good people. I think that's and thank goodness we are.
Yep, I agree. So I think on that, I'm going to say thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Owen. I think it was a fascinating conversation. I think we could probably take it into the bar and go all night on this one. So thank you.
I think
Just a little bit.
definitely.